I want this human, mother. The alien vampire princess desired the human warrior the sun was setting over the vast alien city of Zither, its red light casting long shadows over the towering spires of metal and crystal. The air was thick with the hum of advanced technology and the echoes of distant voices, all carried on the wind that swept across the city's vast skyline. Zither, once a vibrant hub of trade and culture, had become a symbol of power for the alien empire. Now it was a place where only the strongest survived, and where the humans who had been enslaved for generations served their alien masters without question. In the heart of the city, within the grand palace of the alien queen, the royal court was gathering. At the center of the hall stood Lurel, the young vampire princess of the Zither Empire. She was tall, her silver-white hair cascading down her back in waves, and her eyes glowed with a deep crimson hue. A natural beauty, but one that was known for its deadly allure. Lurel had inherited her vampiric traits from her mother, the alien queen, a being of immense power and wisdom. Unlike her mother, however, Lurel was more than just a ruler. She was a predator, and she reveled in her power. Despite her power, Lurel felt a restlessness she could not shake. She had everything, beauty, strength, and the respect of her people. Yet there was something missing in her life. She often wondered what it was, but the answer eluded her. She craved something more than the cold pleasure of ruling. It was as though something within her, something deep and primal, was yearning for something beyond the boundaries of her royal life. On this particular day, Lurel had decided to attend the gladiatorial games, a brutal tradition where humans fought for sport in the massive arena. She had watched these games countless times before, finding them little more than a source of entertainment. To the aliens, humans were mere playthings, disposable and insignificant. But today was different. Lurel had heard whispers of a human warrior who was said to be unlike any other, a human who could fight with the strength and skill of an alien. She was intrigued, curious to see if this human was truly as extraordinary as they said. As she entered the arena, her piercing gaze swept over the crowd. The sounds of the battle raged below, the clash of metal and the roar of the audience filling the air. But Lurel's attention was fixed on one figure, a young man, his body battered but unyielding. His name was Kale. His dark hair was matted with sweat, his chest heaving with every breath. He was covered in blood, but his eyes were full of defiance. The arena was filled with alien spectators, yet Kale stood at the center, surrounded by the corpses of alien gladiators who had fallen to his sword. Lurel could see the fire in his eyes. It was a fire she had not seen in centuries, a fire that could not be extinguished. His strength was not merely physical, it was something deeper. It was the strength of a human spirit that refused to break. She had never seen a human fight with such resolve. The thought struck her like a jolt of electricity. She was intrigued, deeply so. As the battle came to a close, Kale stood victorious. The crowd erupted into applause, but Lurel barely heard them. She was too focused on the human warrior who had captured her attention. She stood silently, watching him as he was dragged from the arena, his hands bound in chains. He was nothing more than a slave, a plaything for the aliens, but she could not shake the feeling that he was something more. There was something about him, something that made him different from all the others. Lurel approached the edge of the arena, her footsteps silent on the smooth stone floor. Her eyes never left Kale's form as he was led away, his face expressionless but his gaze fierce. She felt a strange pull toward him, something that she could not explain. It was an unfamiliar sensation for her, desire. But it was not just the desire for his body, it was something deeper, something she had not felt before. She wanted him, and she did not know why. Her mother, the alien queen, had always warned her not to get too close to the humans. They were weak, insignificant creatures, no more than animals to be controlled. But Lurel could not shake the feeling that Kale was different. She was drawn to him, and it was a feeling she could not ignore. She wanted to claim him to make him hers, but she also wanted to understand him. Why was he so different? Why had he fought with such passion, such strength? Later that evening, Lurel ordered Kale to be brought to her. She stood in her chambers, her long gown flowing behind her as she gazed out of the window at the city below. The red sun had set, and the stars were beginning to shine in the darkening sky. She could feel the weight of the night pressing down on her, but there was something else, anticipation. She had always been in control, always had power over everyone, but tonight she would be the one who was powerless. She was about to meet the human warrior who had captured her attention in a way no one ever had before. When Kale was brought before her, he did not bow or kneel as the others did. He stood tall, his eyes unwavering as he met her gaze. Lura was not surprised by his defiance. In fact, she found it intriguing. Most humans cowered before her, begging for mercy. But Kale was different. He stared at her with a mixture of suspicion and curiosity, as though he could sense that she was not like the others. Lurel studied him for a moment, noting the way his muscles rippled beneath his tattered clothes. He was strong, but it was not just his strength that intrigued her. It was the fire in his eyes, the same fire that had burned so brightly in the arena. She could see that he was no mere slave. He was a warrior, a force to be reckoned with. "You fought well," Lurel said, her voice low and cold. "You have earned my attention, human." Kale did not speak, but his eyes held a challenge. He did not fear her, not in the way most of the others did. It was clear to Lurel that he did not see her as a goddess or a ruler, but as something else. He saw her as a being who could be defeated, just as he had defeated the others in the arena. That thought thrilled her. "I want you, Kale," Lurel continued, her words sharp and direct. "Not as a slave, but as something more." She could see the confusion in his eyes, but also something else, something that made her heart race. Was it fear, or was it something deeper, something more primal? She did not know, but she would have him. She would make him hers, and nothing would stand in her way. Kale's lips parted slightly, but no words came out. Instead, he gave her a silent nod, as if he understood that this would not be a choice for him. He had fought in the arena, and now he would fight for his life in a different way. Whether he liked it or not, he was in her world now, and there was no escaping it. Lurel stepped closer to him, her eyes locked on his. She could feel the power between them, a power that was both dangerous and irresistible. She was a vampire princess, and he was a human warrior. They should have been enemies, but instead they were bound by something far more dangerous. "Do not disappoint me, Kale," she whispered, her voice a soft promise of what was to come. Kale stood in the cold, stone cell beneath the palace, his eyes staring out through the bars. The alien city of Zither sprawled beneath him, its towering spires and shimmering lights offering no comfort to him. His hands were bound with thick chains, but they were nothing compared to the chains that held his mind. He had come here as a warrior fighting for his people, but now he found himself imprisoned, a captive of the alien empire that had enslaved humanity for generations. He had never felt so helpless, yet in this prison something had changed. The feeling that had stirred within him when he first met Lurel had only grown stronger. It was as if her gaze had awakened something deep within him, something that had been buried under years of hardship and suffering. He wasn't just a slave. He was a human, a warrior with a fire that burned brighter than anything he had ever known. The sound of footsteps echoed through the corridor, pulling Kale from his thoughts. He didn't need to look up to know who it was. The soft click of high-heeled boots on stone was unmistakable. Lurel. She had come to see him again. When the heavy iron door creaked open, Kale looked up to find her standing in the doorway. Her figure was bathed in the pale light of the flickering torches along the walls, her silver hair cascading down her shoulders like a waterfall of light. She looked every bit the royal princess she was, her eyes glowing with an otherworldly intensity, her presence commanding attention even in the most mundane of settings. Yet Kale saw past the beauty. He saw the power, the hunger, and the darkness that lay beneath. Lurel entered the cell without a word, her eyes scanning Kale as if she were studying him, analyzing him. The way she looked at him made him feel both like prey and something more, something important. He didn't understand it, but he couldn't ignore the sensation that he was more than just another human in her eyes. "I hope you're not too comfortable in here," she said, her voice smooth, but with an edge that sent a shiver down his spine. "I didn't bring you here to play games, Kale." Kale didn't reply. He had learned early on that silence was often the best response to someone like her. Words wouldn't change anything. He was a prisoner and she was his captor. That was the reality. But Lurel wasn't looking for silence this time. She stepped closer, her eyes narrowing as she studied him more closely. "You think I'm just like the others, don't you? Another alien who thinks I can control you. But I don't want to control you, Kale. I want you to see me as something different." Her words were confusing, like a riddle he couldn't solve. Kale's gaze met hers, trying to make sense of her intentions. She was different, that much was clear. But he couldn't allow himself to be distracted by her. He couldn't afford to think of her as anything other than the enemy. "You want me to fight for you," Kale said flatly. "Isn't that what you've always done with humans? Turn them into your puppets, make them fight for your entertainment?" Laurel didn't flinch at his words. Instead, she smiled, a small, almost sadistic grin. "I suppose you could say that," she said softly. "But you're not like the others, Kale. You've shown me something no other human has. You've shown me that you can fight not just for survival, but for something bigger. And that makes you interesting to me." Kale didn't understand. He had been in the arena for weeks now, fighting day after day for the pleasure of the alien spectators. He had survived because that was all he knew how to do. He fought to stay alive, nothing more. But Laurel saw something in him that he didn't see in himself. She saw a warrior, not just a slave. "I don't need your pity," Kale said, his voice low but firm. "I don't need anything from you. All I want is to escape this place and free my people." Laurel's expression shifted. For the first time, Kale saw a flicker of something softer in her eyes, something almost human. But it was gone as quickly as it had appeared, replaced by the cold, calculating look he had come to expect from her. "You think you can escape?" Laurel asked, her tone mocking. "You think you can free your people? You have no idea what you're up against, Kale. You're in my world now, and in my world, humans are nothing more than tools to be used." Kale gritted his teeth, refusing to back down. "Then let me prove you wrong." Laurel's eyes glowed brighter, her lips curling into a smirk. "I like your spirit," she said, "but you're wrong if you think I'll let you go that easily. No one escapes from Zither, no one." With that, she turned and left the cell, leaving Kale alone with his thoughts. He could feel the weight of her words pressing down on him, but he refused to let them break him. He wasn't just some pawn in her game. He was a human, and he would fight for his freedom. He would fight for his people. Days passed, and Laurel visited him often, always with her cryptic words and subtle gestures. She would bring him food, though he rarely ate. She would offer him chances to prove his worth, but Kale always refused. He wasn't interested in playing her games. He didn't care about her offers of power or favor. All he wanted was to escape. But as time went on, something changed. The attraction Kale felt for Laurel began to grow, despite himself. He knew he shouldn't feel anything for her. She was the enemy. She had captured him, imprisoned him, and used him for sport. But there was something about her that was different. She wasn't like the other aliens. She wasn't like the cold, indifferent monsters who saw humans as nothing more than livestock. There was a complexity to her, a depth he hadn't expected. He had fought in the gladiatorial arena, fighting for his life, fighting to survive. But now he found himself fighting something else, something that confused him. It wasn't just his survival that mattered anymore. It was something more, something he couldn't define. He wanted to break free, but he also found himself wanting to understand Laurel, to know what made her tick. But there was one thing he knew for sure: he couldn't trust her. She was an alien princess, and no matter how much she intrigued him, she would always be his captor. He had to keep his focus. He had to escape. One night after Laurel's visit, Kale was left alone in his cell again. He sat against the wall, staring out at the stars through the small window. The city of Zither glittered beneath him, but he could see nothing but the darkness that surrounded him. He closed his eyes, his mind racing with plans of escape. He would break free, no matter what it took. But even as he thought about it, a part of him wondered what would happen if he stayed. What if he allowed himself to give in to the strange pull that Laurel had on him? What if he allowed himself to be with her, to understand her, to see the side of her that no one else saw? He pushed those thoughts away. He couldn't afford to get distracted. Not now, not when there was so much at stake. Kale closed his eyes and took a deep breath. Tomorrow he would fight again. He would prove his worth, not just to Laurel, but to himself. And no matter what happened, he would never stop fighting for his freedom. The days dragged on in the dark, oppressive atmosphere of the alien palace. Kale's life had become a series of routine struggles. Each day brought a new challenge, a new test of his strength, endurance, and willpower. Every time he thought he could break free, something else would keep him shackled, both physically and mentally. But the fire within him never died. He fought, he resisted, and he held on to the one thing that gave him hope: the thought of his people, his family, and his freedom. Laurel visited him often, her presence both a temptation and a reminder of everything that was wrong with his situation. She was a constant enigma, beautiful, powerful, and terrifying in equal measure. She had begun to show a strange interest in him, one that was difficult for Kale to understand. Her actions confused him. She wasn't like the other alien rulers who saw humans as nothing more than tools to be used. Lurel, for all her power and pride, seemed different. And that made her more dangerous. Today was no different. Kale had been summoned to a new arena, but this time it wasn't for the usual gladiatorial games. This time, Lurel had chosen a more personal challenge. She stood at the entrance of the arena, her silver hair flowing like a river of light, her crimson eyes fixed on him. The crowd had gathered, but they were quiet, waiting for what was to come. It wasn't the usual spectacle. Today, it was just Kale and Lurel. "Ready to prove your worth, Kale?" Lurel's voice was calm, but there was an underlying tension in her words, a challenge that Kale couldn't ignore. He stood tall, his muscles aching from the constant battles he had fought. His body was covered in scars, a testament to his survival. But it wasn't just his body that had been marked. His mind was scarred too, constantly battling the weight of his situation. Still, he held his head high, determined not to let Lurel or anyone else see his weakness. "I don't need to prove anything to you," Kale said, his voice firm. "I'm not your toy to play with, Lurel." Her lips curled into a faint smile, but her eyes remained serious. "Perhaps, but you are mine to command for now, and you'll learn that not everything can be resisted. Not even your own desire." Kale's heart pounded in his chest, but he refused to show any sign of weakness. He couldn't let her get inside his head, no matter what she said or did. He was a warrior, and he would not let her turn him into something he was. Lurel stepped forward, closing the distance between them. She was close now, so close that Kale could feel the heat radiating off her. Her presence was overwhelming, intoxicating. It was a power he couldn't escape, no matter how hard he tried. But he wouldn't give in, not now. "Not ever. Tell me, Kale," she said, her voice low, almost a whisper. "Do you think you can fight me? Do you think you can resist me forever?" Kale met her gaze, his eyes filled with defiance. "I don't need to fight you, Lurel. I'm fighting for something much bigger than you. I'm fighting for my people, for their freedom." Lurel's expression shifted, a flicker of something darker crossing her face. She reached out, her fingers brushing against his chest, sending a jolt of electricity through him. For a moment he felt his resolve waver, but he quickly pushed the sensation away. He couldn't let her win, not like this. "You think you can take down the Empire? You think you can defeat me?" she asked, her voice growing colder. "You're nothing more than a human. A weak, insignificant creature. You're nothing compared to me." Kale's eyes narrowed. "Maybe," he said, his voice steady, "but I'm not giving up, and neither are my people. You can't keep us in chains forever." Lurel stepped back, her expression unreadable. She regarded him for a long moment, as if considering his words. Then, without a word, she turned and walked toward the center of the arena. "You think you can lead a rebellion?" she asked, her voice carrying across the arena. "You think you can win?" Kale didn't answer. Instead, he stepped forward, his fists clenched, ready for whatever came next. He didn't need to respond. His actions would speak louder than words ever could. Lurel raised her hand, signaling the start of the challenge. The ground beneath their feet trembled as the arena came to life, shifting and moving like some living entity. Kale stood ready, his body primed for battle. He wasn't sure what Lurel had in mind, but he was prepared for anything. Without warning, the floor beneath him gave way, and Kale was plunged into darkness. He hit the ground hard, his body absorbing the shock, but his training kept him steady. He quickly rolled to his feet, scanning his surroundings. The arena had transformed into something else entirely, a maze of narrow tunnels, each one leading in a different direction. Kale could hear movement around him, but he couldn't tell if it was Lurel, the crowd, or something else entirely. He moved cautiously, his senses on high alert. He had fought in many battles, but this was different. This wasn't just a fight for survival. This was a fight for freedom, for the future of humanity, and he would not fail. The sound of footsteps echoed through the tunnel, and Kale instinctively crouched, blending into the shadows. A figure emerged from the darkness. Lurel, her glowing eyes the only visible part of her in the pitch-black surroundings. "You can't hide from me, Kale," she said, her voice echoing through the tunnels. "I see everything. I know everything." Kale's heart raced as he tightened his grip on the weapon he had taken from one of the fallen gladiators. He didn't know if it would be enough to defeat her, but he wasn't about to back down. He would fight. He would resist. And he would win. Lurel's laughter echoed through the maze. "You think you're ready for this? You think you can defeat me? I am the princess of the Zither Empire. I am power incarnate. You are nothing." Her words cut deep, but Kale refused to let them break him. He had heard worse. He had fought for far less, and he had never given up. Not once, not ever. As Laurel stepped closer, her figure becoming clearer in the dim light, Cale made his move. He rushed toward her, using the darkness to his advantage. But just as he reached her, she vanished, disappearing into thin air. Cale froze, scanning the area, but there was no sign of her. "You can't win," her voice echoed from all directions. "You will never escape me." Cale's breath quickened as panic began to set in. He couldn't see her, he couldn't hear her. The only thing he could feel was the weight of her presence looming over him, pushing him to the brink of defeat. But then he remembered something. He wasn't alone. He had never been alone. His people were out there waiting for him. His family, his friends, his fellow warriors. They were counting on him, and he wouldn't fail them. With a roar, Cale launched himself forward, using his remaining strength to break through the shadows. He didn't care if Laurel was watching. He didn't care if she thought she had already won. He would fight and he would win. No matter what. Laurel's voice echoed one last time, filled with frustration and something else, something Cale couldn't quite place. "You're more than I thought, Cale, but it's too late." Cale's heart pounded in his chest as he sprinted through the maze, determined to find a way out. He wasn't sure what would happen next, but he knew one thing for sure: he wasn't giving up. Not now. Not ever. The night was thick with tension as Cale sprinted through the dark, winding corridors of the alien palace. His body was bruised, his muscles sore from the endless battles, but his resolve was unshaken. The challenge Laurel had set for him had tested his limits, but he wasn't going to back down now. He had come too far. His people depended on him, and no matter how powerful Laurel was, he would not be her pawn. Cale's breath came in ragged gasps as he pushed forward, his footsteps echoing through the empty halls. He didn't know where he was going, but he knew he couldn't stop. Every corner he turned seemed to lead deeper into the labyrinth of the palace. The walls around him were cold and unfeeling, and yet there was something alive in the air. The oppressive weight of Laurel's presence lingered, always watching, always waiting. He had learned to expect the unexpected. Laurel was no ordinary opponent. She was a princess, a vampire with the power to bend the will of others. But what made her so dangerous wasn't just her power. It was the way she seemed to understand him, to see through him in a way that no one else could. Her words had a way of getting under his skin, of making him question everything he had fought for. But Cale wasn't going to let that happen. He couldn't afford to doubt himself, not now. His mind was focused on one thing: escape. He had to get out of this palace, get back to the humans, and lead them to freedom. The thought of his people, his family, kept him going, pushing him forward even when his legs felt like they were going to give out beneath him. Cale rounded another corner, his eyes scanning the shadows for any sign of danger. The palace was eerily quiet now, as if the very air itself had been drained of life. He could feel Laurel's presence closing in, her energy pulsating through the walls like a heartbeat. She was here somewhere, watching him, waiting for him to make a mistake. But Cale wouldn't make a mistake. He couldn't afford to. He had been a warrior all his life. He had fought countless battles, faced down enemies stronger than him, and survived against all odds. But this was different. Laurel was not just an enemy to defeat. She was a force of nature, a being of immense power. And yet, despite her strength, Cale could feel something stirring within him, a deep, primal instinct that told him he could defeat her. He could take her down. He just needed to find a way. Suddenly, the air shifted. Cale froze, his senses on high alert. There was no sound, no movement, but something told him that Laurel was near. He could feel her, a presence that seemed to fill the space around him. He didn't know how she did it, but she had a way of making him feel like he was always being watched, always being hunted. Without warning, the ground beneath him shifted, and the stone walls of the corridor seemed to close in. The maze-like palace had a mind of its own, and Cale was trapped. He turned to find that the hallway had become a dead end, the walls solid and unyielding. He was cornered. "Caught in your own trap, Cale?" Laurel's voice echoed from the shadows, cold and mocking. "You should have known better than to try and escape." Cale's heart pounded in his chest, but he didn't let his fear show. He gritted his teeth, fists clenched, ready for whatever she had planned next. "You can't control me, Laurel," he said, his voice steady. "No matter what you do, I'll never give in." Laurel stepped out from the shadows, her figure illuminated by the dim light that filtered through the palace's ancient architecture. She was beautiful, deadly, and her eyes glowed with a hunger that sent a chill through Cale's spine. But there was something else there, too, a flicker of something he couldn't quite place. "You're wrong," she said, her tone soft but filled with an underlying power. You already have given in, Kale, you just don't know it yet. Kale's jaw tightened. He didn't understand what she meant. He had never given up. He had never let her control him. But there was something in her gaze that made him question his own thoughts, his own beliefs. She saw something in him, something that he hadn't fully realized himself. But whatever it was, it didn't matter. He wasn't going to let her win. I'll never be yours, Kale said, his voice firm. I don't care how much power you have, you can't break me. Laurel tilted her head, studying him with a mixture of curiosity and amusement. You think I want you for myself, Kale? You think I'm trying to break you? How naive. She stepped closer, her every movement graceful and deliberate. What I want, what I need, is something more, something that you can't even begin to understand. Kale took a step back, his eyes narrowing. You think you can intimidate me with your words? He asked. You think I'm scared of you? I'm not. Laurel's smile faded, her expression turning serious. No, Kale, you don't understand at all. I don't want to break you. I want to see if you're strong enough to stand with me. Kale froze. Her words hit him like a blow to the chest. He had always seen Laurel as the enemy, as the one who had captured him, who had put him in chains. But now she was telling him something different. She wasn't trying to control him. She was offering him something he couldn't quite grasp. What are you talking about? Kale demanded, his voice low and dangerous. What do you want from me? Laurel stepped forward again, her hand reaching out to touch his arm. For a moment, Kale hesitated, unsure of what to do. But then he remembered what she was, the alien princess, the vampire who had enslaved his people. He couldn't let his guard down, not now. I want you to join me, Laurel said softly. Not as a servant, not as a prisoner. But as an equal, together we could be unstoppable. We could change the galaxy, Kale. Together we could lead a revolution. Kale's mind raced as her words sank in. She was offering him something that he had never imagined, power, freedom, and a chance to change everything. But it came at a cost. He would have to join her, to work with her, to align himself with the very people who had enslaved his kind. It was a choice he couldn't make lightly. I don't need your power, Laurel, Kale said, his voice steady, though doubt gnawed at him. I have my own strength, and I'll use it to free my people. Laurel's expression darkened, the flicker of hope that had been in her eyes fading into something colder. You're a fool, Kale. You could have had everything, power, freedom, the galaxy at your feet. But instead, you choose to fight against it. You choose to fight me. Kale didn't answer. There was nothing more to say. He knew what he had to do. He would never join her. He would never turn his back on his people. No matter how tempting her offer was, he would remain loyal to the human cause. You'll regret this, Laurel said quietly, her voice tinged with a mixture of sorrow and anger. But it's too late now. With that, she turned and vanished into the shadows, leaving Kale standing alone in the dead-end corridor. Her words lingered in the air, echoing in his mind. She had offered him everything, but he had refused, and now there was no turning back. Kale stood still for a moment, his heart pounding in his chest. The weight of her words pressed down on him, but he pushed them aside. He had made his choice. He would fight for freedom for his people, no matter the cost, and no matter what Laurel said, he would never join her. Not now, not ever. Kale stood at the edge of the palace grounds, looking out over the city of Zither. The sun was beginning to rise, casting a golden light over the massive structures and the sprawling streets below. It should have been a peaceful moment, but the weight of the world was on his shoulders. The rebellion was growing, but so was the danger. Every day, every hour felt like a ticking clock counting down to something inevitable. He had made his choice. He had refused Laurel's offer, turned his back on her power and her empire. Now he had to face the consequences. The rebellion was ready, but they were outnumbered. They were underprepared. But Kale knew one thing for sure: they could win. They had to. The sound of footsteps behind him pulled him from his thoughts. He turned to see Laurel approaching, her silver hair flowing behind her like a cape. Her expression was unreadable, but there was something different in the way she moved. She wasn't walking with the same confidence she usually had. There was a weariness to her steps, a sense of defeat that Kale hadn't seen before. You're here to try again, aren't you? Kale said, his voice steady but cold. He didn't have time for more games, not now. Not when everything was on the line. Laurel stopped a few feet from him, her eyes meeting his. There was a hint of something softer behind her usual coldness, but it was quickly replaced by the familiar, guarded expression she always wore. No, she said softly. I'm here to offer you one last chance. Kale's eyes narrowed. He knew what she meant. She wanted him to join her. She wanted him to accept her power, her offer, and fight by her side. but Kale had already made his decision. He had chosen his path, and it wasn't one that led him to Lurel or the alien empire. "I've told you before, Lurel," Kale said, his voice firm. "I will never join you. I will never fight for you or your empire." Lurel looked at him for a long time, as if searching for something. Her gaze softened, and for a brief moment, Kale saw the vulnerability that she had hidden so well. It was a side of her he hadn't expected to see, and it made him pause, but only for a moment. "I know," she said quietly, "but you don't understand, Kale. You think you're fighting for freedom, but you're only playing into the hands of those who want to see your kind wiped out. You're running out of time." Kale's heart skipped a beat. He had always known the stakes were high, but hearing her say it so plainly made the reality of their situation sink in deeper. The rebellion was fragile. Their numbers were small, and no matter how strong they were, no matter how determined, they couldn't win without help. "I know what you're trying to say," Kale said, his voice softer now. "But I can't fight for you. I can't fight for an empire that enslaves my people. I can't fight for a system that has no place for us." Lurel's expression hardened again, the softness gone. She crossed her arms, her posture defensive. "You think you're the only one who wants to change things? You think I've never seen the cruelty of my mother's empire? You think I'm blind to the suffering of your kind?" Kale stared at her, unsure of how to respond. The words she was speaking were not the same as the ones she had said before. There was a vulnerability in her that he hadn't expected. She wasn't just the enemy. She was a princess, someone born into power, someone who had never known the same struggles he had. And yet now she was questioning everything she had known. "Then why don't you do something about it?" Kale asked, his voice thick with frustration. "Why don't you take a stand? Why don't you fight against your own people if you care so much about us?" Lurel took a deep breath, her eyes closing for a moment as if weighing the gravity of his words. When she opened them again, her gaze was steady, unwavering. "I tried," she said quietly. "I've tried for years to change things from within, but I am only one person. I have no power against my mother, against the Empire. You don't understand what it's like, Kale. I am trapped. I've been trapped my whole life." Kale's mind raced as he processed her words. She was trapped, just like him, just like everyone who had been enslaved by the Empire. The thought of her feeling as though she had no way out, no hope, struck him harder than he expected. "I never asked for this life," Lurel continued, her voice breaking for the first time. "I never asked to be born into a family that would use me as a pawn. I never asked to be raised to conquer and destroy, but it doesn't matter what I want. I am what I am." Kale's heart twisted. He didn't know what to say. He had always seen Lurel as the enemy, as someone who was above him, above everyone. But now, standing before him, she was just a person who had been forced into a life she never wanted, a person who, in some ways, was as trapped as he was. He stepped closer to her, his eyes searching hers. "You don't have to keep living like this, Lurel. You don't have to stay in this cage. You can make a choice. We both can." Lurel looked at him, her expression unreadable. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The silence stretched between them, heavy with the weight of their unspoken thoughts. Kale knew that they were standing on the edge of something that could change everything. But what exactly that would be, he wasn't sure. Finally, Lurel spoke again, her voice low and filled with a strange sort of sadness. "I don't know if I can change anything. But maybe together we can." Kale's heart skipped a beat as her words sank in, together. She was offering him a chance, an opportunity to stand with her, to fight against the empire that had held them both captive for so long. It wasn't an easy choice. And he wasn't sure if he could trust her. But there was something in her eyes, something that told him that maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something new. "If we do this, Lurel," Kale said, his voice steady, "there's no turning back, no more games, no more lies. We fight for what's right, we fight for our people, we fight for freedom." Lurel nodded, her expression hardening once more. "No turning back, but we fight together." And in that moment, Kale understood. This was it, the moment that would define their futures. The moment when they would either rise together or fall apart. It wasn't going to be easy. It was going to be dangerous, maybe even impossible. But Kale knew one thing for sure: they couldn't keep running forever. They had to fight. "We make our stand," Kale said, his voice strong. "Now." Lurel stepped back, and for the first time, Kale saw something in her eyes that he had never seen before: hope. A small flicker, but it was there, and it was enough. Together, they would change the galaxy.